my lovely listeners, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to read a story I wrote with romantic comedy and fun and a little bit of 50 Shades of Grey. It's titled The Devil You Bring Out in Me. And this story is about Pakou Lee, who has had a run-in in the down worst of luck when it comes to love. She's decided to give it a break and focus on herself until she discovers a handsome, devilish man who makes her forget everything she's promised not to do anymore. But this man isn't just any man. He's the owner of the company she works at and is making coming to work a little bit too hard to maintain being a good girl. So, I invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy.
I've been through heartaches, I've been to heaven. I've done my best and my worst, learned my lessons. No matter how hard my life would treat me, I'd always get right back up, never worry. Cause I got a million reasons to keep holding on. Yeah, I got all that it takes to win and overcome. What I got is just a feeling, but it's oh so strong. It goes on and on, on and on. There's something going on inside of me. I feel it growing stronger every beat. I never just believe in what I see, cause I can feel the energy.
Pakou Lee was a woman of many things, but being labeled a homewrecker, that was not her. How was she supposed to know he was married when he lied to her? Lied! He pretended he was divorced with 2 small children to care for, and being the soft-hearted woman she was, fell in love with his sob story. She became his shoulder to cry on, and soon he became her world. It only took 4 months before she told him she loved him. Yes, it was too soon, but she couldn't fight her heart when it wanted him. Justin Roget, a cunning man of charm, had lured Pakou into trusting him. It was a good thing she hadn't slept with him. Otherwise, he would have made things much worse. So, how did Pakou find out Justin was tied down with a woman? Well, his wife showed up on their date sporting a 6-month belly with their 3rd child and their 2 oldest in tow in their minivan. It was like a horror movie. His wife pointed a finger and called Pakou every bad name her mother told her to avoid ever being called. Justin begged and begged his wife to get in the car, and when she finally did, they drove off, leaving Pakou standing in the rain. It had been 2 months since Justin finally stopped calling her, and she was glad. For one, she was able to go out for coffee without him waiting for her at the corner. She threatened to have a restraining order put on him if he didn't stop. That didn't scare him. But when Pakou mentioned going to his wife and telling her to divorce him, it finally worked, because he had no prenuptial signed. And a man like him, who was worth $1 million, would be wiped clean if his wife left him. Pakou was now finally content that he would stop showing up in her life. But the heartache was still hers to carry. She tried to carry on with her life by throwing herself into her job. She worked as a party event coordinator at Lavish Decor, where she was a top coordinator. She spent a lot of time with her best friend, Ka Yang, who worked with her. Ka was good to her in this time of need. The thing about Ka was that she told it like it was. No sugarcoating, no bullshit. She was ruthless, but she was true to herself. And that was why Pakou and Ka got along so well. But today was no time to focus on her crappy love life. Her boss, Channing Sands, had announced that the company was bought by Wally Corporation. She'd heard of Wally Corporation before, but didn't know that the owner had turned to businesses like Lavish Decor. Standing in the front of the room, Channing looked older than his 37 years of age. He was dressed impeccably in a pinstripe suit that made him 6 foot taller than he really was. His blonde hair was brushed back, but he kept combing through it with his hands, and soon it looked like he'd just gotten out of bed. His dark brown eyes were nowhere near the happy sparkle man she'd known for the past 5 years. Channing was a good man, a man she wouldn't mind dating, except he was very gay. All the good ones were either gay or dead. There went her love life. "I want to assure everyone that no one is getting fired," Channing was saying. Mr. Wally has guaranteed me that everyone will still be holding their same positions, including me, and he'll be the new owner, but I will continue to run the company. So when is this plan supposed to take place? Pakou asked. Channing turned his attention to her and smiled. Good question, Pakou. In a few days, he would drop by the company and meet all of you. The actual transaction will take place in 2 weeks. Pakou reached for her pen when fingers with red nail polish beat her to it. She looked up to find her friend Ka sitting down beside her, chewing on a licorice. Ka was shorter than Pakou, with a short bob and blonde highlights in her brown hair. She sported fancy nails and wore expensive tailored clothes. Like today, she was wearing Dolce & Gabbana with Jimmy Choo's pumps. Hey, that's my pen, Pakou said. Ka shrugged and rolled her eyes. So? Sue me. Shaking her head, Pakou turned her attention back to Channing, who was now discussing the next few weeks' schedule of parties planned. And then she noticed that Roger Stone from the graphics department was shooting Ka daggers in his eyes. She turned to Ka, ignoring his glare. She pinched her friend in the arm. What did you do to Roger? He looks like he's ready to murder you, Pakou whispered. Ka snorted and rolled her eyes. He's upset that I told him he was useless in bed, and whatever he did have, he couldn't put to work. Pakou gasped and stifled a laugh. Oh, Ka, did you tell him that he's got a small, you-know-what? More or less, she whispered. Pakou laughed and shot her eyes up to find Roger's jaw clenching hard. Shaking her head, she slapped her friend on her shoulder. How could you shoot the man's pride down like that? Smiling, Ka replied, Men like him deserve it. In 2 days, he would have forgotten me and used me as an excuse to speak cheap trash with his douchebag friends. I just beat him to it this time. Have you heard from him? Ka asked at lunch. They were sitting underneath a patio umbrella at Major's, a sports restaurant a few miles from where they worked. Pakou shook her head and dipped her fry into some ketchup. Nope, not a peep. Good. That asshole was such bad news for you. Pakou nodded in agreement. Yeah, he was. But I've learned my lesson. I'm no longer dating anyone who appears to be tall, dark, and handsome. They're totally a misfit for my life. I need my men to be secured. They have to be able to take me on without being scared. When you find one, let me know, okay? I'm sick and tired of finding little prissy boys who run home to mama when I say curse words. Pakou laughed. You attract certain men. They're always wrong for you, but you still take them anyways. I know I do, but that's because I'm a cold-hearted bitch. You are too much of a sweetheart, and I can't bear when people hurt you. Pakou reached for her hand. Thanks for always looking out for me. They finished lunch and returned to work. Raquel left her to walk to the arts department. Pakou finished the rest of her planning, and when 5 hit, she was exhausted. She gathered up her belongings and headed out the door. She waved bye to the receptionist. Digging her purse, she retrieved her keys when she heard tires squealing. Looking up, she saw the car flashing lights in her direction. Gasping for her life, Pakou watched as the car steered directly toward her. There was no time for her to even move her legs, but before she realized it, she was floating on air. She was being lifted up and round, and when she finally came to, she stared into a pair of deep blue knee-dew eyes that made her heart flutter. She was in his arms, safe and protected. He was gorgeous as he stepped to the side to avoid the oncoming car. He was strong and tall, with a lean jawline that was decorated with a day's beard. The strong scent of wooden spice entered her nostrils and tickled her senses. She could feel his muscles bulging from underneath the dark suit he wore. A dark lock fell over his eye and made him look like a dark prince. She was breathing fast, almost out of breath, as she stared into his handsome face. Careful, sweetheart. There's a shortage of perfection in the world. I'd hate to lose you, he said in a deep, dark baritone voice that woke her senses. Pakou swallowed hard, trying to find her voice. Thank you. You can let me down now. His face broke into a smile. Is that what I'm holding? You're so light I barely felt anything. She blushed as he set her down on her feet. It was then that she finally noticed that the car that had almost hit her was long gone. She turned to her savior and realized he was a lot taller than she had expected. "Do you work here?" he asked. Nodding, she replied, "Yes, I do." His grin grew wider. "I'm glad to hear that, Pakou. I'm really glad. I'll see you around." When he turned to go, she let out the breath she was holding and on trembling legs walked to her car only to realize he'd called her by her first name. Those eyes visited her in her dreams. They haunted her as she woke, and throughout the day she thought of his voice. He was a stranger who wasn't really a stranger, if that made any sense at all. She was lost in her own thoughts during meetings and didn't return calls. When lunch rolled around, Ka came to her office and closed the door. She crossed her arms and cleared her throat. Pakou knew her long enough to know that this was her stance, for wanting to know what was going on. "If you tell me that you went back to that asshole, we are done being friends here and now," Ka threatened. Pakou laughed. "What is this? I think you know me better than that." "I don't know. You seem to be in your own world today. You haven't even said hello to me all day long, and usually you're in my face about who I was banging last night." Shaking her head, Pakou replied, "Ka, you're the one who is in my face about who you banged the night before. I don't ask for that information. You give it freely." As if she didn't hear Pakou, she went on, "So, are you going to tell me, or do I have to dig?" "There's nothing to dig," Pakou said as she shut off her computer and gathered some files together. Ka came around and blocked her. She raised her eyebrows, and Pakou knew the look. It was a look that she wasn't backing down, not even an inch, until she got what she wanted. Taking a deep breath, she shrugged and then almost laughed. I almost got hit by a car," Pakou started. "What? When?" Ka interrupted. "Will you let me finish?" Ka raised her hands and crossed her arms. Pakou tucked his dark hair behind her ear. "I was leaving work, and I was digging around in my purse for my keys, and that car came out of nowhere. But then I was saved and lifted up by some exotic god." Ka gasped, her eyes opening wide. "Oh, tell me more." "That's just it. I don't know anymore. He was holding me in his arms and telling me how perfect I was, and then he said my name and left." Ka frowned. "Wait, what? I'm confused. He's a stranger, but he knew your name?" "Yeah, he did. It didn't even occur to me that he did until after he left. Oh, he's gorgeous, Ka, to the point that I'm completely lost. He's been on my mind all day long." Laughing, Ka replied, "Good Lord, do you have it bad?" Graham Wally watched Pakou and her friend walk out together. That woman was like desire on two legs. The dark hair that flowed down her back, legs for days, a face carved by angels, and perky breasts that would fit perfectly in his hands. He'd been following her when he saw her employee picture a few months ago, when he decided to buy lavish decor. The company was taking a serious nosedive, and he wasn't into that kind of business venture, but when he saw her photo, he wanted her, and he began following her career, work, and life. She was brilliant. He didn't understand why she wasn't made manager. Lord knew Channing didn't deserve it. He wasn't the type to follow a woman. He usually liked his life quiet, but when he saw her, he wanted her so bad it hurt to breathe. Graham was the type to never take no for an answer. When he finally felt her in his arms last night, it proved that together they could make magic. She was a perfect fit for him. He knew that she came from a broken home where she had little to have. He wanted to give her the world. She should be wearing clothes made from the most expensive silk, and he wanted to be the one to give her everything. Graham watched as she got into her small green Ford and started the car. It took 2 turns before the car turned over. She drove off and her friend followed. He started his car and followed them. He entered up on 94W, and surprisingly the road wasn't busy. She took the exit toward Woodbury, and he knew where she was heading. As expected, she parked her car in the sushi parking lot. It was a place he visited often. He watched as the 2 ladies got out, and she hooked her arm around her friends. He waited a split second before he followed. "I always eat too much when I'm here," Ka complained. "Why come here? When we get back to work, I'll be snoring." Pakou took a long gulp of her water and shrugged. I was craving sushi. You said for me to pick wherever, so here we are. The waiter put down a plate of sushi rolls and Pakou picked up her chopsticks, ready to devour when something caught her eye. She almost dropped her chopsticks as the man she met yesterday walked in. Ka noticed her and turned to look where she was staring, and when she turned back around, her red lips had opened to a big O. Is that him? She asked. Pakou nodded, for she had lost her voice at the moment. He nodded at the waitress, who was now blushing. He was taken to sit in the back, and Pakou pinched her cheeks and was surprised she felt pain. Oh my God, I'm not dreaming, she said. Holy shit, he's hot. I'm almost tempted to go thank him for yesterday. Ka laughed. I bet you can't. Is that a deer? Ka shrugged. Pakou knew it was even before she asked the question. She took a deep breath and stood on shaking legs. She puffed up her hair and walked toward where the man was sitting. He was dressed in a dark gray suit with a menu in his hands. From his looks, she knew he was a very well-kept man and very rich, too. She felt awkward when she was halfway there and was ready to turn around when he looked up and met her eyes. Shit, she thought. Too late. But a smile spread across his face, and he set the menu down. He stood up and extended his hand. Nice to see you here, he said. Pakou removed her hand and cleared her throat. I saw you come in, and I thought, well, I didn't really get to, really thank you, and I didn't get your name, too. He gestured for her to sit down, and she accepted. He smiled at her and leaned back in his chair. There's no need to thank me. My part-time job is to help beautiful women from harm. I'm certified, actually. Pakou laughed. No, really? I've never heard of that class. His eyes sparkled and he leaned forward on his elbows. Well, I'll let you see my certificate if you're lucky. Not too many women get to see it. The only woman who has seen it is my mother. Why your mother? Because she was the one who certified me. Pakou's heart fluttered. Oh, wow. You must be here on lunch? Have you ordered? No. I mean, yes. Yes, I actually came to thank you, and then I'm headed back to my friend. She's waiting for me, so thank you. She stood, and he did too. She shook his hand once more, and then headed back to where Ka was sitting, impatiently waiting. God, took you long enough. What did he say, and what's his name? Pakou cringed. Darn it! I forgot to ask. She turned back around, but he was already gone. The waitress who had seated him walked toward her and smiled. Miss, the gentleman sitting there has graciously paid for your lunch. Pakou felt her cheeks flush as she stared at the check stub the waitress handed her. There was a number scrawled on there. Ka took it from her hands and stared at it, and then she laughed and looked up at Pakou, who was stunned silent. You're gonna call him, right? Ka asked. Should I? If you don't, I swear I will. It took Pakou 4 days to settle down and think hard about calling that gorgeous man. She'd named him Blue-Eyed Devil, for she had no other name to give him. She didn't want to rebound for another man too soon, but on the 4th day since she met him at the sushi bar, she decided she was going to call him after lunch. Smiling from her decision, she stood up and patted her neatly done hair and smoothed down the black skirt she wore. She had a meeting in a few moments, and finally, the owner of the company was going to make an appearance today. Channy had been on edge all day long since she arrived this morning, and she knew he wanted to make an impression because he wore his gray suit. The boardroom was filled with the employees, and most of them were feeling Channy's fear of being fired, even though they weren't. She found Ka sitting with a cup of coffee and slid in next to her. Just as she reached for the coffee cup, she heard Channy's voice addressing the room that Mr. Wally had arrived. She looked up and froze. Standing before her was none other than the god who she hadn't called in 4 days. He was dressed in a blue suit that matched his eyes and entered the room with such suave that it made James Bond look awkward. In her stunned state, she dropped the coffee cup and screamed when the hot liquid poured on her, and she shot to her feet and felt her cheeks blush from the slip-up. Pakou, are you okay? Ka asked as she stood up trying to help her. I've got this, Blue-Eyed Devil said as he handed her a napkin. Are you hurt? Pakou looked up to find that in the time span that she spilled her coffee to where she stood up, he had already made his way to her. She stared at the napkin in his hand and took it, making sure their fingers didn't brush. She patted her skirt and nodded as she looked away. Pakou, why don't you take a few moments to clean up? Channing said. Yes, sir, she whispered. I'll help her, Ka said as they both walked out the door. Once they were in the bathroom, Ka shook her head while Pakou turned on the water to wash the spilled coffee from her skirt. Her head was still spinning over the idea that this man was the new owner of the company. It was a good thing she hadn't called him. It would have been a conflict of interest. I don't believe this, Ka said. He is Graham Wally? I always thought the man behind that name was old and wrinkly. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm glad I didn't call him. It would have seriously backfired today. Right? Pakou straightened up and cleared her throat. Well, I'm going to go in there and show him that he has no effect on me. Let's go. When they entered the room again, Graham was standing at the front of the room, addressing everyone. For a split second, their eyes met, and Pakou broke the stare. She found a seat in the back of the room, and Ka sat beside her. As I was saying, Graham continued, I'm simply purchasing the company as an investment. I am not going to be changing any managerial positions. Channing will still be your manager. I believe that in order for this to thrive, you must work with those you know well. I believe Channing is doing an excellent job. In the workforce industry, the people respond better to a great leader. And Channing is a great leader. And in the time that he has run this business, profit has gone up 40%. I'd like to continue to see him run this and hopefully bring the profits up higher than last year. Channing blushed and smiled. You're praising me too highly, Mr. Wally. Graham smiled. It's in much dire need. That's it for today. I just wanted to introduce myself and get a chance to know you. My office is down the hall from here, and if you have any questions or concerns, please come see me. I'll leave a business card for Channing. Thank you. Pakou stood up so fast she almost sprained her ankle. She was the first to make it to the door until she heard Graham call her name. Everyone stopped and turned to stare at her as he walked to her. I'll accompany you to your office. I have some questions for you, he said. Without a moment's pause, he took her elbow and led her out of the way. He knew the way to her office, and it didn't surprise her. When they made it inside her office and he had closed the door, she broke free from him and crossed her arms. You shouldn't be in here, Pakou said. You never called me. Why should I call you? You're my boss's boss. He smiled. Technically, I'm your boss's boss's boss. But it shouldn't matter. Laughing, she replied, yeah, right, it doesn't matter. I don't know how it functions in your world, Mr. Wally, but in mine, if you own the company I work for, I don't place personal phone calls to you. I'd hate for the world to assume that I slept my way up to management. Graham frowned, and he sighed deeply. Is that what you think this is? I would never do that to you, Pakou. I know that you and I don't know each other, but putting you out like that was never on my agenda. She shrugged. I don't care what is on your agenda. You need to leave now, and I won't be calling you. If you need me for something, it has to be business related. Otherwise, I will stay out of your way. His handsome face showed a hint of disappointment, but it disappeared as soon as she saw it. He straightened his posture and stuck his hands in his pockets. I knew you were like this the moment I met you. It was nice meeting you, Pakou. She watched in horror as he smiled at her once and then left. As soon as he was gone, her heart throbbed to have him return. What the hell was wrong with her? She was going to get into trouble if she continued to have these thoughts about him. He was her boss now, and getting into bed with him was clearly out of the question. She better get her head on straight if she didn't want to be put out of a job. Her head was clouded with thoughts of what if, and as much as her head said it was done, her heart was never going to get over it. The workday went by like a snail. The clock seemed glued, and ticking felt like it thundered with pain. Pakou poured her heart into her work that afternoon, making no room for her to even think about anything. She developed a pattern that made her time finally race, and when she looked up, it was time for her to go home. She gathered her things, turned her computer off, and shut the lights down. As she made her way to the front of the office, she found that the building was eerily quiet. It was only 6, and usually people stayed until 7 or 8. She walked to the front door and was surprised to find it was locked. What the? She muttered as she tried again. She reached her phone to call Ka when she heard feet pattering behind her. She turned around quickly and found Graham walking toward her with his hands in his pockets. Gone was a suit and tie, and he had left 3 buttons open, and his sleeves were rolled up, revealing thick, muscled forearms. She almost stopped breathing when he turned the lights off and darkness consumed them. I was waiting for you to look at me today. I was watching you the whole time I was talking, hoping that you'd glance my way. But you kept your eyes on the ground, acting as if you didn't care, he whispered. This isn't funny. Let me out. You didn't respond this way when you didn't know who I was before. Correct me if I'm wrong, but your eyes were full of desire, and you wanted to be close to me. Why am I suddenly now not wanted? Pakou laughed. Are you seriously asking that question? I work for you. Don't you have some rule that we can't be in a relationship? Isn't this against company policy? He chuckled low, and even as he appeared in the light of the afternoon sun, his eyes were dark, and Pakou saw the light flutter of his irises as he gazed over her body. Her heart raced as his stare fell onto her chest. They lingered before moving on to her hips. When his eyes finally came back to hers, she was on fire. This damn body of hers was going to betray her. She just knew it. I'm not asking for a marriage proposal. I'm simply asking for lunch. Is that so hard to agree to? Yes, you may work for me, but we can call it a business lunch. An employer has the right to take out his employee for lunch. Is that wrong? She found her throat to be dry. Yes, it is, when your mind is nothing close to business. Let me out, please. She wasn't sure if it was because of her desperate voice or because he saw her shaking, but when he moved closer to her, he took out a key from his pocket and unlocked the door. She stood for a moment before she bolted out without even looking back. The spreadsheet in front of Graham was getting nowhere. He hadn't moved the mouse an inch since he sat down 3 hours ago. His mind was flooded with thoughts of a woman with dark hair and long legs. What was wrong with him? He never had to chase a woman, and here he was, literally begging on his knees for her to be with him. What the hell was wrong with him? He rubbed his face and sighed deeply. He turned the computer off. There was no point in trying to do any work now. His mind wasn't going to let him do it. He reached for the glass of wine and took a long gulp. Taking the sweater off he had, he laid it on the chair and looked at a few files of paperwork and then tossed it aside. What the crying hell, he muttered as he massaged his temples. He logged onto the company's calendar and it showed that she had a client meeting tomorrow at the Red Dragon. He noticed the name and it made his blood run cold. This customer was a man who was very well known for his dirty ways, and he needed to make sure he was there. Graham arrived 10 minutes before she did. He sat in the back of the room with a cap and sunglasses. She was wearing a red suit that made her look like $1 million. Her hair was down and curled, and he ached to have those curls on him. She smiled at the waitress and sat down. A few moments later, the client, a male in his late 30s, arrived. Immediately, he saw the desire in the man's eyes as he watched her. Fire roared in his heart as he watched them together, but he had a plan. A few moments later, Pakou excused herself and took her phone. She spoke on it for a few moments and then excused herself to leave. When she got up to go, he followed. She was outside talking on her phone when he found her. What do you mean? We haven't even started talking about plans yet, so I don't understand how it could be that he's not the type of customer we take. He heard Channing's voice speaking from the other side about regulations and whatnot, and when she turned around, froze as her eyes met his. He took the phone from her and cut him off. I've got this, Channing. I'm here, and I'll go over this with her. He hung up the phone and handed it back to her as she took it without blinking. Let's go, he said. Wait, she cried. I'm confused. Why are you here? Shrugging, Graham replied, I'm here to make sure he keeps his hands to himself. They walked back into the restaurant with the client, Matt Rover, an engineering director who needed to rebrand his company, sat with his hands laced together. But the light in his eyes faded when Graham walked in with her. Mr. Rover, Graham said as he extended his hand to him, I'm Graham Wally, the new owner of Lavish Decor. Matt's face paled, and he took his hand. Oh, hello, Mr. Wally. I was not aware that it was under new management. A slight omission due to company policies, but I happened to be here on this side of town and wanted to join in on the conversation. How are you doing today? He smiled, although his eyes told Graham he wanted to do anything but. I'm fine. I suppose I should reschedule with Pakou since it's not convenient for the two of us to talk. Why not? Graham asked. Shrugging his shoulders, Matt replied, Well, with you here, she may hold herself back. I'd like to be able to speak with her on a one-on-one basis where she can be completely honest with me and not be afraid. Graham frowned. And why would she be afraid? Laughing, Matt leaned back in his chair. Look, I think Pakou is a big girl, and I don't understand why you're here on this conversation when it's nothing but business. And then his eyes shifted to her and gave her a creepy grin. How about we meet again next week, and we can go over the details of what I'd like for you to do for me? Pakou shifted in her seat uncomfortably. Mr. Rover, since I am here, let's just go over the details. I don't see why my boss being here has anything to do with you not wanting to speak about your needs. After all, anything that needs approval will have to go through him anyways, so it will save me time. Perfect, Graham thought as he leaned back in his chair. She'd seen right through his evil needs, and this proved that Pakou was smart enough to take over Channing's position. Matt, however, didn't seem impressed, and he let out a long breath of disappointment. The truth is, when I work with someone, it's solely based on the person I choose, and it doesn't involve higher-ups to get their hands dirty with me. Pakou raised an eyebrow. Why does it bother you that Graham is sitting here? Is it because you were planning on doing something inappropriate and you were caught before you could? Matt's face turned bright red. She smiled and leaned forward. Mr. Rover, I want you to understand something about how I work. Even if my boss wasn't here to witness this, I would have turned you down flat should your hands and eyes look somewhere not where they need to be. I didn't become the best decorator in town due to me losing panties because some guy like you winked at me. Graham smiled and nodded his head in approval. I believe Miss Lee has spoken her thoughts regarding her decision to work with you. Matt stood up and sneered at them. You both are a waste of my time. As he left, Graham turned to find Pakou's hands shaking, and instantly he reached over to steady her. She looked up at him with inquisitive eyes. Are you all right? He asked. Nodding, she replied, Yes, I'll be okay. I just need a moment to collect my thoughts. I wasn't expecting this kind of interaction. And then she paused and looked up at him. You know his style of work, don't you? Is that why you're here? Graham smiled and shrugged his shoulders lightly. He's not someone who hasn't kept silent about his ways. He has developed too many lawsuits in the past year. I am not sure how it slipped past Channing's eyes the kind of person Matt is, and why he would make you come meet him alone. She bit her lower lip. I'm afraid to ask. He's a dirty player. He has assaulted multiple of his assistants, mainly women, and recorded it for blackmail, and burned up money that doesn't belong to him. Pakou let out a breath of disbelief. Why is he still walking out in the public then? Because the women are afraid to expose him. These are women who are married, have children, and a public figure. He purposely goes after such to keep his dirty work covered. But this time he chose you, and it was a good thing I took a look on the calendar. He watched her face paled, and he reached over a hand to touch her. When she looked up at him, she put on a fake smile to cover her fear. Well, thank you, Mr. Wally, for coming to my rescue. It's Graham. I work for you. I don't care, he said with a low voice. I admire everything about you, Pakou, and I don't care what others think. But since we are here, lay out your terms, and I will meet you halfway. Pakou's eyes widened. I'm sorry. Lay out my terms? Regarding what? He smiled and crossed his arms. Yes, regarding what it will take to get you into my bed. Thank you for tuning in. Chapter 2 will be out shortly.
I've done my best and my worst, learned my lessons. No matter how hard my life would treat me,